So, welcome to this episode of Crap No One Tells You. With me today is Jennifer Faust from Lehigh Tax and Bookkeeping Services, or Bookkeeping and Tax Services, sorry.
Yes.
Got it
That's
backwards
correct.
that
Yeah.
time. So, you're going to tell us a little bit about the crap no one tells you about being a CPA.
Oh, yes. It's all interesting, right?
So,
It's fun.
what is some of the crap no one tells you about actually being a CPA?
Well, I actually enjoy my job. I really do. I like working with people. Some of the things that you might not know is I really do become a confidant to people. Like they tell me things that I feel like a therapist sometimes. I truly, truly do. Because I've had people come in my office and they're crying because they've got overwhelming tax bills, and they tell you a lot more than what you really need to know to prepare their taxes. But that background information as to their personality helps me. It helps me to help them.
So, being a CPA is not just a numbers game.
It absolutely is not. It really isn't. I mean, that's a big part of it, but knowing your client is a big part of it as well.
So, there's a lot of human interaction as far as like you're saying that there's more to it than just here, let me drop off my W-2 or whatever and hand it to you and go, okay, see ya.
Yeah. In certain instances, it is that way. I mean, if you only have a W-2 and your tax return is very simple, then it kind of is that way, or it can be. But when you have a business or you are a high net worth person, or you have a lot of things going on in your life that affects your taxes or even outside of your taxes, then it becomes more than just dropping information off. You really do, or I do, and I think that's what sets me apart from other CPAs, is I really do try to get to know my clients so I can help them.
So you work primarily with businesses, right?
Yes, closely held.
Okay. So I know there's a lot of times where people are starting their business. They don't know whether they need a CPA yet or not. Like, let's say they started a business this year, they did $50,000 worth of revenue, and they go to some random place. We won't name any names because it's a relatively simple return at that point in time for most.
For most, yes.
At what point should someone in their business look at it and go, I really need to talk to a CPA? Not when taxes are due, not at the end, not when the year is over.
Then it's too late.
Right. At what point, at what like revenue point and at what time of year should they really start saying, okay, I need to talk to someone about what I have going on?
Yeah. I think rule of thumb really should be once you decide you're going to start a business, you should at least talk to a CPA just to get some guidance. Not that, even for tax preparation, but dollar amount isn't so much as important as it is situations.
Okay.
Because you could have a business that only has $50,000 of income this year, but they might do a lot of different things coming up with inventory, or they plan on growing. So things should be set up a certain way and set up properly right from the beginning. Even if you're doing your own taxes, for the first year or two, you really need guidance. And even a little bit of guidance on, when you form your entity. You would normally talk to a business lawyer and get their opinion on how it should be formed. But as far as the taxation part of it, that comes into play a little bit differently. Once your dollar amount starts growing, you might want to make an S election and change the way your business is taxed.
Okay. So, because I know here in the U.S., for example, you have multiple different types of entities. Not everywhere has the number of selection you have here for how you structure your business legally, but how you structure it can have drastic impact on your tax returns, right?
Oh, it absolutely, yeah. It can, yes.
So I always remember very first time I talked to a CPA, really good guy. We sat down and I told him what I was doing, and he's like, okay, so I've known you for a little bit now. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you seem relatively risk adverse. Or no, you seem like a risk taker. Yeah. And I'm like, maybe. And he goes, so how do you want your books done? How do you want to file? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you have all these things here that are borderline. They could be in, they could be out, depending on how you interpret it, and then depending on how the IRS interprets it, if they decide to audit you. Do you want to leave it in, or do you want to take it out?
Yeah.
And it was one of those interesting questions where I was like, I didn't even realize that was a choice, right? Like, I thought it was like black and white, like the IRS set it in stone, only to find out, no, the IRS set it in sand.
Yeah, and it's true, and it's written that way on purpose. I mean, it's like laws are, right? Laws really are kind of, they're not necessarily black and white to a certain point.
Right. Some
Yeah.
laws are definitely like, a law.
You're not-
like
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no
right,
way around.
right.
You cannot finagle this.
Right. No, but there are things where there's that gray area. And that's kind of where, setting precedents comes in and that kind of thing. But a lot of times, each business, just because it's deductible for your business, it may not make sense to be deductible for another business, or vice versa. Just because they're not taking the deduction doesn't mean.
So the
not.
type of business you have also affects what you can or cannot write off, for example.
What makes sense for yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to think of a good example off the top of my head.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example because we run two different entities, right? So for us, our meals and entertainment account is normally proportionally relatively high compared to other businesses because we are a relationship business. We take a lot of clients out. We do a lot of stuff like that. So on one side of the business, that would make perfect sense. If we had that on the product side of the business,
Doesn't make sense.
it would probably raise some red flags, right?
Yeah. And then I have like a school, for instance, where their food supplies, it's a huge deduction because they're buying food for their students, and you're not going to have that same deduction. But yeah, that basically is rule of thumb. And part of it too is, I'll have clients come to me and they'll say, well, I think the wording is close to being if it's a necessary business expense or something. I can't remember the exact words, but
So define necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And that's what you do. And that's kind of how, we look at it is, okay, does this make sense? Can I deduct this? And then we take our stance, and then I put that in the work papers. If there's any questions, should there be an examination, then we can say, this is why we did it. This is our backup for our decision.
And I just want people to understand that, yes, we're talking about something really obvious, right? But then you have this weird thing, like if I go out and I buy a suit, not deductible. If I go out and order 10 shirts with my logo on it, deductible.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all these fine lines and minor things. And I even believe for certain industries, like you could put your dry cleaning in as an expense.
It just depends.
But you can't put your suit in, right? Like, so there's all these like gray areas where you're like,
And well, I'll tell you what, I had a client, this was interesting, who bought a lot of guns and ammunition.
Okay.
And I mean a lot.
We don't
Because
have to
they
define what a
stocked
lot
up
is.
and Right. It was a lot. And he said to me, I want to take this as a deduction. And it was like $80,000. And I said, okay. I said, why, and he said, well, I need it because I don't feel safe. I'm going into people's houses. So how do you even look at that, right?
Right.
Okay, well, I get that you do need to feel safe, but
But $80,000 worth of. Are you going into a war zone?
No. But so it is. You do have to kind of look at it and take a step back and like, is this really reasonable? Because maybe to have one gun because you feel you need it for protection because you are going into the bad areas of city. Yeah, maybe that, is reasonable.
Right.
But
But 17 of them, not so much.
Yeah. Right. So it's interesting.
So what are some, I know you guys do a lot of reviews or in your previous life, which we'll get to how you got to where you are today. Yeah. One of the things you brought up to me once that I found fascinating was you were talking about drop shipping or like being an Amazon seller.
Oh, okay. Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
we're talking about like trying to figure out fees and things you pay on, not necessarily just that, but in general, right? How many business owners are actually fully aware of where all their money are going?
No, it's crazy. You would be surprised. And sometimes on the bookkeeping side of it, the fees like that are every month, you see like 4 or 5 coming from the same place, and you ask, what is this about? What is this for? Some of them they don't know. I have clients who, especially now with all of these apps with Venmo, Apple Pay, we see these recurring charges and they don't even know where they're going because it doesn't show on the bank statement.
So they just signed up for stuff and then
Right. And
it
it
just
just
sits there.
keeps coming out and it keeps coming out. So, one of the big things to do is definitely visit your bank statements and credit card statements and see, because the Apple Pay stuff, you can't tell where it's going a lot of times.
You have to go into Apple to see what it was
and
paid
see
for,
the
right?
actual thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just on
So
a side
that's
note to that, someone actually told me that there's still something like, I don't know, 300,000 active AOL subscriptions for dial-up internet, which no
believe that.
longer exists
Yeah.
because they can't cancel it.
They can't. You mean
You
they
can't.
can't?
You
they
cannot
can't
log into
cancel-
your account because it doesn't exist anymore to
And they
cancel
just
it, I
keep-
believe.
and they
So it
keep-
just keeps reoccurring, and they actually have to challenge it on the bank side to cancel payments on it.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
So it's one of those fascinating things
Yeah.
that, and I think a lot of business owners, someone once told me large amounts hide a lot of flaws.
That's what I was just going to say too. I don't want to mention any names,
All right.
okay? But I have worked for companies where they're being charged by this company, okay, and we're doing the financials. It was absolutely impossible to tie any of the numbers out. Nowhere. Like, you're getting statements from these people that you're paying, and they're saying this is what we're charging you, but it doesn't
Doesn't break
tie
it out.
out to the bank statement. And when you try to get somebody, an actual person, it's almost impossible, to the point where you're banging your head. And I think a lot of times people just gave up. And you wonder, is this why these companies are so profitable, right? Because how many times in your life do you get so frustrated that you're like, that's it, I can't take it anymore, I'm done. I mean, a lot of times, if you knew the actual dollar amount, you would keep pushing and pushing and pushing, but you can't even come down to an actual dollar amount on some of these statements.
That's pretty insane.
But
So,
it's true.
how did you end up becoming a CPA?
Well, honestly, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. Like, all of my relatives have their own businesses, so I grew up in business. I do. I really like business. And I think that's why I like working with the closely held businesses, because it's important. It's important to the entrepreneur. That's their heart, and you see it. And that's why I love seeing them grow. I love seeing them succeed. So I went back to college when I was older. I had my children, and then I put myself through college after I got divorced, and I raised my children and did that all on my own. And then I did go to, I worked with Baker Tilly in Center City, so I was with a big firm,
Okay.
and it's a very great firm to work for. I learned a lot there. And then I kind of eventually went to some smaller firms, mid-sized firms and everything. And then I had a client, you, who said to me, do you ever think about going out on your own? And I didn't think it was for me. I was scared, as you pointed out. But some things happened at the firm that I was working for at that time, and I knew it was time to make the move. But I don't ever regret going into, accounting or being a CPA. A lot of CPAs don't have a personality. They're great at what they do.
They're not people persons.
Right.
They're number
That's
people,
what it is.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like I have that, where I do like talking to people. So that kind of sets me apart a little bit. So for me to be a CPA in the beginning, at least. Now it's changing a little bit, but in the beginning it was more like you're one of those people, like a real dry, And no, I'm not.
Right. I'm the opposite. I'm a people person that can do numbers, not a numbers person that's being a people person.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So
But
interesting.
that's how I kind of came into this. It was mostly because of the way I was raised in business.
So you are now technically going through the same things as a lot of your clients that you have been advising for years.
Yeah.
Has that opened your eyes to some things?
It has, because I thought that I understood growing up in the field, but it's different. It's different when it's your own. You see it, you get it. You get it. You get the lying awake at night because I got to pay my bills. You get this client's not paying me. How am I going to get this money? And it's a whole different world. It's a whole different challenge.
The numbers all of a sudden have an emotional meaning.
They do. And now I'm happy that I kind of took to people the way that I did. And, because I've seen some people working in the field and some of my colleagues that weren't as understanding or empathetic. And I think that it's important. It's important because you know what? When you come into my office, I had a woman, tears, crying, because she owed a lot of money in taxes. It wasn't a client of mine. She was new to me. And, for me to be able to sit there and be empathetic with her and really try to put myself in her shoes, she appreciates that. She tells me all the time, and I do think it's important because when you're dealing with that kind of stressor in your life, you want somebody that you feel is on your side for sure, or that you can at least talk to about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a whole other side of the CPA accounting world that people don't understand is that when you get a letter from Uncle Sam, do not rush to the phone and call them. Do not try to make, there have been so many times, and you have told me stories where somebody got a tax bill only because it was an error.
Yeah.
But the person was fully willing to negotiate paying it without even taking a second look.
Or they do pay it. That's even worse. Trying to get the money back is because you already admitted guilt.
Right, because that's what they assume if you paid, right?
Yeah. So what I tell my clients is, in the event that you should ever get a notice, you call me right away. And I mean that because I've had a client call me at 8:00 on a Friday night, and I was glad they did. I don't want them going through the weekend because it was nothing. It really was nothing. But when you open that letter, you're like, oh my God, they think they're going to jail, which that really doesn't happen a whole lot, especially not in the beginning when you get your first notice.
You're not Martha Stewart.
Yeah, right, Willie Nelson or anybody like that. But it means a lot to the client that I can say to them, look, don't worry about this over the weekend. We'll address it Monday morning, and it's going to be fine,
So what I'm getting from you is when you start looking for a CPA, you really need to find someone that you feel like you can talk to, that you can develop a personal relationship with.
And that you trust. Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some key things that someone just started their business, they're going into their second year. I'm always amazed that when I talk to smaller business owners, how ill aware they are of their numbers. Because I will sit down with them, they come in, they need help. We'll look at them and go, okay, what's your margin? They're like, margin on what? Okay.
Yeah, you would be surprised at the amount of people, especially their first, second year, they don't even have books. It's all here.
It's run off the bank account, right? Like you and I both know someone that ran an entire business for years just off the bank account, right? Had no idea about what his actual numbers were. If I had money in the bank, I'm making money.
Yep.
If I don't have money in the bank, I'm not making money.
And
but
you
there was
are
no
absolutely right.
So someone that is starting out, where should they start? Where should you go for basic understanding of your numbers? Because your CPA is not going to sit down and give you a bookkeeping 101 course.
Well, we
right?
do on the bookkeeping side.
Correct.
I will do that. And because I think it's important for people to understand, at least to have a basic understanding of a profit and loss statement, of a balance sheet, and, what are they looking at if they want that, if they're interested. Some people just couldn't care less. But you should, at the very least, have like QuickBooks or some simple accounting software, or even a spreadsheet. If you're good with Excel and you don't have a lot of transactions the first year, that you're at least putting it somewhere where you're showing all of your income and all of your expenses. So you actually have an idea, because you know what? If you're picking this bank statement up every month, you're not sitting down and comparing month to month to month to month. So you don't get a good feel of, why are my prices, why are my expenses increasing, but my revenue's not? And like that kind of thing. That's why I think software is really important, because once you get it in there, you can pull it up and you can run comparatives, right next to each other. Right. And you can see how your margins are kind of changing, and try to figure out, why are they?
Right. I just had a conversation with someone last week. They're shutting down their business. Mm-hmm. They were not a small business. Multiple employees, high revenue numbers, was never really too concerned about it, wasn't looking at his books on a regular basis. He would sit down with the accountant at the end of the year. Well, the first 6 months into it, it hadn't been so bad because it was end of pandemic. It all made sense. Well, now almost an entire year goes by before they sit down again, and the CPA goes, you realize you lost a lot of money this year. And he goes, what? Because he wasn't monitoring his numbers. He didn't realize his sales were going down. His expenses were going up, and it ate away his margin. He was already a nominal margin business. Mm-hmm. So any shift on either the expense or the
really affects them.
Income side has a drastic effect. And if this is especially true if you're a low margin seller, right? Like any minor change, a 3% increase in prices doesn't seem like a lot, but it's huge.
You, especially, over the course of a year. Mm-hmm. And, when you think about it, like the big corporations, they have their margins. Mm-hmm. And if they're not meeting them immediately, their prices go up.
Yes.
And that's inflation, right?
I tell people all the time, if you want to know how drastically they change their prices, start shipping with UPS. Mm. Their surcharges change on a daily basis. Yeah. Like if gas goes up 10 cents between yesterday and today, UPS makes an adjustment for that.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, I was having a conversation with a client one time, and we were talking about prices going up and things like that. It was, when the inflation started kicking in, and they said to me, well, you don't see the big companies, they're not taking price cuts. I said, no, because they run on margins. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference, So you want to know how important are your books, Just because you're small doesn't mean they're not. Yeah. Keep looking up, because the big guys knows how important it is.
Oh, absolutely. And they make instant adjustments, right?
Yes.
Like think about how often you walk through a supermarket and you see someone swapping out price tags on stuff.
Just like that. Look at gas, right?
Every day, right? And then we talk to these smaller businesses and they're like, oh, no, I haven't really raised my prices in 2 years.
Yeah.
You realize the cost of everything has gone up month over month over month. So even though it says, oh, inflation's 8%, yeah, but that means your price over the course of 18 months could have tripled.
Yeah.
Like on certain items. Yep. And we've seen it in our business. We've seen something that used to cost, call it 3 years ago, $60 is now $125.
Look at the contractors with the wood and everything,
how
all of that went up. I mean, it's crazy. If they didn't have an eye on their margins, they would have lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot.
It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So let's get back to the question I actually asked.
What was that?
If someone wants to start learning the basics about this, what are the things they should focus on learning? You said they should at least understand how to read a P&L.
Yeah.
Understand how to read a balance sheet. Like you don't have to understand it. Mm-hmm. You just need to know what the numbers mean, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the other important things is something you and I talk about a lot, is the importance of hiring professionals to help you with the things that you don't know. Marketing. A lot of people, they want to set up their own website. You know, if you're looking to really grow, you want to make an investment in yourself. An investment is your brand. You want that solid right from the foundation to build on. So that's one big thing. You know, I try to tell my clients that's an investment. Payroll. These people, they want to do their own payroll. No.
You
Not
do
a
not
good
wanna do
idea.
that, right.
No, and you want a reputable person. You don't want to do it yourself on an app because it might be very cheap, but if you run into a problem,
There's nobody
good
there
luck.
for you.
Yeah.
Right.
And same with, you know, all of the professional services, you know, it's huge.
Yes.
It's really important. That would be another thing.
And it's funny, so because you're an accountant and you said, well, you want to hire a marketing professional, right? I'm sitting on the other side as a marketing professional going, no, you want to hire someone that can help you understand the numbers, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand your numbers, I can't help you,
Right.
right? Because we need to know all this stuff. If you
plays all
go
into
talk to a banker, what's the first thing the banker's going to say?
Yep.
We need to know your numbers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. But
So-
it's amazing how the small business, or when I don't want to say small business, the startup is what I'm looking for. They're afraid to spend money. But what they don't realize is it's an investment, just as we said. And that money that you put out is an investment in your business, whether it be on consultants to help you to understand, you know, what you need to change. Sometimes you need outside eyes looking in.
Yes.
And, you know, it helps to hire somebody. So it is an actual investment. The first year, plan on losing money.
Yeah.
You know,
People look at it as a taboo. I lost money. But, so let's be very clear. So there's ways you can lose money that's good.
That's good.
And there's
that's
ways
true.
you can lose money that's bad.
That's very
right?
true,
So
yes.
you want to lose money in a good way, per se.
If it's an investment and that's what's causing you to lose the money, that's different. But if it's your expenses because you're just overspending on things that are not necessary for your future, for the foundation of a good business, that's a little different. That's wasteful.
Right. So it's the difference between going out and buying promotional material versus buying a piece of equipment. Right? If that equipment is now capable of making you more money than whatever promotion you would get,
Yep.
the smart investment is buying the piece of equipment,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then depending on what your CPA says, what the equipment costs, all that stuff, you now may also have options for how you write that off.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. So you could, if you, let's say you are projected to make extra money this year and you need that piece of equipment, you might be better off buying that piece of equipment and writing 100% of it off that year
Yes.
because you will get a better tax benefit from it than writing it off over
a few years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it all goes into planning. You know, are you, just like you said, are you expecting to make a lot more money this year and not over the next couple of years? Now, as a startup, most likely, if you buy that piece of equipment, you don't want to expense it all that first year because you probably have a lot of startup expenses. So you probably would want to take the 5-year deduction kind of thing. It's all looking at the whole picture. It
Right.
really is. That's why your books are so important.
And there's all kinds of, this is what always blows my mind, is I've been in business, for 15 or 16 years now. And I'm still learning about like tax stuff, right?
Everything, right.
So someone pointed out to me the other day that if you buy a vehicle that is over 6,000 pounds gross weight, you can write the entire thing off in 1 year.
Yes.
And I went and I looked how many vehicles are over 6,000 pounds in gross weight. Not commercial vehicles,
Right.
Like, but actual, like,
Usually SUVs and that kind of thing, yeah.
and
trucks.
all of a sudden I understood why there are certain types of vehicles you see far more on the road than others. And you're like, I bet you that's a business owner
Yeah.
that didn't want to pay Uncle Sam, so they went out and they bought a Mercedes, or
Yep.
they went out and bought a Cadillac Escalade, because I believe those two both
Yeah.
fall over the 6,000
There's some
pounds.
Range Rovers or Land Rovers, whichever the bigger one is, that falls in there because I've had clients do that as well. if you're going to, it depends on your budget, obviously,
Right.
but if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right?
Right.
Get the write-off. But yeah, and that is true. If you need it for that year, it's part of tax planning. And, it's not an illegal thing. You're following the
Correct.
tax code.
They say you can do it, right?
Yeah.
But for someone that may be looking at buying a new car, they can go,
Something
okay.
to think about.
Because depending on what tax bracket you're in, you could be getting up to a 30% discount off of buying that car versus buying a different car.
Yeah, because the money that, you might be spending it on buying a nicer vehicle, which you probably deserve because you worked hard for it. You don't, you give
I'm
less
not
to
judging
uncle.
people, right? As a business
I'm
owner,
not.
any
No,
business
yeah.
owner that
They
stands
work
up and say,
hard.
I can't wait to pay my taxes.
Right,
I'm like,
exactly.
no.
That's less money that's going to pay for taxes, and you get to
Correct.
keep it and reward yourself.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I
Don't
would
get
see
me
it that way.
wrong. Like, I'm always glad when I have to write a check to the IRS because
I
that
know.
means
Yeah.
we've actually made money that year.
It's true.
Right.
I guess that's one way to look at it.
So it is.
right?
I mean, it is a net positive when we have to pay taxes. The only time we pay taxes is when we're truly profitable.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's funny because
But it doesn't mean you can't minimize it.
No, and that really is the truth. I have clients who are like, they don't want to pay the taxes because they made money, but it's like, we made a lot of money this year. Can you see the positive? It's just like you said. But our job as CPAs is to try to help minimize the tax liability, by using the code the way it's meant to be used. I mean, it's there to help you. It's not like, they're saying, don't use this, right? I mean, that's what it's there for, so that you can follow the guidelines and use it to the best of, your benefit for your company.
So last question before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
If someone's listening that's thinking about becoming a CPA,
Yeah.
what would you say are the top 3 things they should be aware of before going into this industry?
Well, I would say the first thing, which would be no surprise, is the long hours during tax season. Because, that's when everything's coming in. That's your season. Tax season does run almost all year, but it's not as heavy as it is from, say, maybe mid-January through April 15th. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, I guess I would say is you really need to, or you should, if you have a passion for business, you'll do well, because it's, they say a passion for what you're doing really isn't like working. And I really do. I have that passion, and I do. And also having that passion and being able to help people with it, it really helps. So I guess that would be number 2. What would be the third thing that I would want them to know? You don't have to even be a numbers person, really. I can say that. If you're going to be a tax accountant, you can be more on the tax code part of it, because when I first went into it, I was going to go to school to be an attorney.
Okay.
And a tax attorney, actually. And somebody said to me, get your CPA license first. So once I did that, I realized I don't need to be a tax attorney. I was just trying to understand and work with the law and how to get that, to use that to help people. And that was enough for me then. I didn't need to spend the money to go to law school. Plus, I learned from a business attorney today that tax attorneys have a lot of liability, which I never really stopped and thought about. So I guess I'm kind of glad that I stopped. I don't want to say stopped at CPA because it's very fulfilling for me, very fulfilling. And then I get to do the numbers part of it as well, which I enjoy. It's a game.
And you get to do the people portion.
And the people portion, which I do enjoy. Wears me out sometimes, but I still, it's very rewarding, very rewarding.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And we might have to bring you back during tax season.
Yes. We'll see. We'll see if I'm still standing. No, it's all good. I like tax season.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks.
listening.